as always. Well, not always, because last time we didn't have Colin Gal doing our theme song. We had our guest do her own theme song last time, but I don't think our guest today has a theme song. However,
Yet.
This is Steve Shoney. I'm the city manager for the city of Upper Arlington. I am joined by my co-host.
I am Darren Schulman. I'm the city attorney, and I get co-host status. You slipped that in there. That's very generous.
I'm. This is our third year of doing this. I feel like you've progressed to that point. You've actually booked a couple of guests. You actually, our current guest, you managed to book twice.
I have to give credit to Marsha, my wife, though, because she actually reached out to Blake. So I'm glad you're giving me credit, but I'm an honest man, and Marsha booked this guest.
Okay, that's fine. I've had actually our last guest was a guest that was suggested by my wife. So, we're on that theme. Before we get to our guest, again, for those who didn't listen to our last episode, I don't know how you wouldn't listen to all of our episodes in sequence. I don't understand people like that. But just in case you didn't, we had recorded 2 episodes. Actually, today's guest, we were in the midst of recording his episode when suddenly producer Maggie's computer just goes blank, and our headphones.
It's much more interesting to say it burst into flames.
And
it pretty much just died.
It didn't even give a squeak. It just went flat out dead. And Darren and I had a grieving process for a good couple months.
I was seriously depressed because I don't want to build you up, but that was like my favorite episode. It was like a super awesome episode, and I was like, how can we recreate all this magic, which we're going to try to do today?
Yes. Our guest today is a 3-time medalist, or
two-time medalist.
2-time medalist, 3-time
Paralympian.
Winner of many championships, and a graduate of Upper Arlington High School, and the former occupant.
Well, yeah, most importantly on your resume is the fact that our guest Blake Haxton used to live in my house.
So we really had to get Darren to finally book a guest. It had to be done primarily by his wife, and it had to be someone that had previously lived in his house.
Yes.
But he did pretty well with that. So Blake Haxton, welcome back to the show, the pod, whatever we call this.
Thank you.
You know the drill. We know we've got our start bench cut exercise that we're going to put you through. Now, we do, I mentioned your athletic exploits and honors before, but we don't like our listeners to think that our guests are one-dimensional. We know that you have many, many layers to you. And so we each have a start bench cut for you.
Neither of which have to do with sports.
Neither of which has to do with sports or rowing.
Let's do it.
All right, so Darren, you go first.
All right, so just a little bit of inside baseball. Last time I asked you your favorite Lord of the Rings character to rank, start bench cut, and you did pretty well, but I'm trying to rig it this time so my favorite does better. So
nice.
Start bench cut, and then we can go back to the original. These are kind of Hobbit-like characters. Merry, Pippin, Smeagol.
Ooh.
Because last time, and we can go into this, we did Bilbo and Frodo or whatever, and it was kind of obvious that Smeagol wasn't coming out on top. So
for the average listener out there,
those are Lord of the Rings characters. For non-nerds, is that what you're saying, Steve?
For the average listener, most folks will know Smeagol, right?
They better. He's the best. No bias there,
but the other two are
Merry and Pippin are 2 of the hobbits that went along with Frodo in the Lord of the Rings movies.
All right. Okay.
And they're not as important as the main ones, which is why I'm stacking the deck here. But I have a feeling you're going to give me a good answer.
Ooh, there's pressure. Okay, start.
And you did indicate you liked Lord of the Rings, so I'm not just springing hobbits on you.
I can answer the question. It's just not the quality is what we'll figure out here in a second. All right, start bench cut. I think the easy one to cut. The easy one to cut is Smeagol.
Oh my gosh, man! I literally tried to pick 2 of the lamest ones so you wouldn't do this.
So part of the problem is more colloquially.
You are now my favorite guest of all time.
Colloquially called Gollum. There it is.
Cut Gollum.
He's sort of this pathetic character in like the classic sense, right? You feel for him, like guy's out fishing, finds the most powerful artifact in the world, and just like becomes obsessed with it, and to get all mythological on it. That can happen to any of us, at basically any time.
Yeah, and yet
So-
you cut him.
Oh yeah,
And it's kind of like me in pickleball at some level.
You are the Smeagol. You are the Gollum of pickleball. There's a lot to be interpreted there. So
Oh, I mean, okay. I like wandered down to the boatyard on the Scioto when I was 15, and here I am, a long time later, 18 years, and like more than half my life has been to some extent has revolved around like moving a very small boat over the water. So anyway, I can relate to that. Nonetheless,
he gone.
he gone. He didn't. He's he's out.
Is it because he's like pathetic or just not interesting to you? Like I'm gonna dig into this because I'm really sad about
That's a little bit of it. Like I feel like I always identified with Merry and Pippin. Like
Really? Okay.
Yeah, like they just they're kind of sidekicks, but they mean well. Also, like I think if the Lord
Darren, I think you would identify with that.
Yeah, maybe I should like them more now. You put it that way.
I don't know. I feel like if you were to pull out one weakness of either the books or the movies, then it's that there's not really any comic relief. Like there's not, again, there's just not comic relief in those.
They're as close as you get in the movies.
Yeah, like Merry and Pippin are as close to Timon and Pumbaa as you're gonna get. I mean, it's just like that's
Lion King moving in there. Okay,
that's as close. That's
now,
what you.
But now one of them's got to start and one was benched, so you got to differentiate here, man. And they usually are kind of together. So it's kind of a tough
they're
question.
usually always in each other's pockets. But oh man, I can picture it, but I can't remember which one's which.
Pippin is the guy from Lost, I think.
Yes.
If that
So
helps.
I'm gonna start Mary then because he asked for second breakfast.
All right, there you go.
That's he wins the tiebreaker. He does end up screwing up a lot later on, but not intentionally. Again, he ends up essentially giving away the party.
Isn't he the one that grabs the orb and they can kind of see him?
He grabs the Palantir, not the new fancy company, but the thing the new fancy company's named after.
Yeah.
And nearly ruins everything.
So he's benched.
So no, he gets
He's not
benched.
cut. You still cut my guy Smeagol, but
Yeah, I mean, he bit Sam's finger off. That's not. I can't.
See, I
you can't
would-
be starting that guy.
I'm going to get a little nerdy, then I'll move on. But like, I feel like he's really the hero of the entire Lord of the Rings. Because remember, like Frodo's kind of like, I'm just going to keep it and do my thing.
So here's one. Do you know who Tolkien said was the hero of the whole story?
No, you're about to break my heart, aren't you?
Maybe.
Okay.
It's actually pretty cool. So he was writing a letter to a friend after he finishes all this is in the real world. He writes a letter to a friend and he says that Sam is the chief hero of the whole story.
That's my wife's theory.
There
She
it is.
agrees
And
that he is.
Tolkien said that. He's like, no, Sam. He said Sam's the chief hero of every character in my story. Sam is the chief hero, and he says because he's loyal to a fault. He's loyal without end. He carries a burden that no one else sees, and no one's there to support him. And he is purely carried along through every imaginable suffering by like a fond memory of home and a love for his friend.
Wow.
And that's it. That's Sam. That's all there is to it. He gets no glory. Like in
No,
the
he
whole
like
story,
carried him up the hill
That's
in the
it. Like in the
movie,
whole
you
story,
know.
Sam never has an audience for what he wants to do. And there is a funny anecdote where the reason he went on the adventure is because he couldn't work up the courage to ask out a girl he had a crush on.
Yeah,
So,
pretty much.
Yeah, that was it. And the way he's written into the book is that like just the memory of her could like remind him of home and kept him going in the middle of like hell iterated.
Yeah, I can't dispute that theory. Because Tolkien actually justified it, and I think if you watch the movies, he does. He's like the only truly good. But at the end, Smeagol did bite off that finger, which got the ring off.
It's
man.
true. If he's not there, then you still have the problem. So proximate cause.
I'm not going to make you change your opinion, but pro Smeagol here. So thank you for geeking out with me on that.
Thank you.
I love doing this, because I love doing it, but also it makes Steve uncomfortable because have you even seen the movie, Steve?
No, I've seen the movies. I've never read the books, but I've seen the movies.
Okay, because usually when we nerd out on stuff, Steve's just like, I'm checking out for a few minutes, and I enjoy that.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, it's been a while since I've watched the movies, but yeah.
So you know a little bit about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So anyway, you have a start bench coach, which is new.
It is new. This is not one we did, but
It might break your brain because it broke mine.
It is. So you don't pay the bills with rowing.
True.
You are a high yield corporate bond analyst.
True. I'm impressed. Thank you for remembering that.
Actually, that is kind of impressive.
Yeah.
I just knew it was some sort of finance thing. So.
Yeah. No one. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. So, and I also looked back at my notes. I also re-Googled you. Is actually what happened. So, start bench cut. APA Corporation's unsecured notes. Vermilion Energy's senior unsecured notes. Or Kazakhstan Electricity Grid Operating Company, otherwise known as KEGOC, corporate notes.
Well, first of all, this is funny to me, but do you have any idea what he's talking about?
I know all those.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Because we tried to make Kazakhstan power company. Man.
Actually, so I'm.
This is not financial advice.
This is not financial. Darren the lawyer is hereby certifying.
That's my issue. So again,
If you want to think on that, I have a question for Darren.
For me? Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
I just want to know who's the Smeagol of Lion King. We got on that and then we jumped off.
Oh, who is the Smeagol of Lion King?
We can also come back to
Scar?
It's not
He's bad.
he's the villain. He's
Yeah,
the
he's
bad
like
guy.
It's one of the hyenas.
It's
one of the
that's what I was thinking. It's gotta be
hyenas.
one of the
Yeah.
hyenas.
Yeah, there's
The
like one of the
goofy one.
there's one of the hyenas that's the goofy one that's kind of a little bit sympathetic because he's
The one of like the tongue that's hanging out?
Yeah.
yeah.
Like he's just glad to be included.
Yeah.
He
He's
might be
included
a
a lot
little
of bad
bit
stuff, but
too happy to be Smeagol, though. It's probably like the forgotten hyena.
I mean, we're talking about Disney versus Tolkien, so it's there's the depth of.
It's not the lead hyena because he doesn't have that
Are
much.
we recording?
Yes.
Okay,
We're always
please Disney fans don't come after me, but it is not the level of sophistication and character development that you typically find in Tolkien.
Tolkien hated Disney.
The person or the company?
Both. Not the person. I mean, he hated the content.
the Disneyfication of everything.
Exactly. He gave a lecture once. It's called On Fairy Stories. Tolkien. You can just read it. It's dense, but it's a good read. And he goes into extreme philosophical depth about fairy tales, essentially, and like why we like them, why they're interesting, how they should be constructed, and he had very, very strong views about that.
So he's not anti-fairy tale like in the Hans Christian Andersen sense.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, for him to tell it, he would say, I'm extremely pro fairy tale. Just that I have some.
But it has to be pure. It has to be pure to the art form.
Yes, a lot of it. I mean, you could even see it in Lord of the Rings. He felt that it should. I think to some extent he thought that it should be darker, in the sense that there is like a genuine struggle between good and evil, and not like a sing-along song. I think that was a little bit of his first, like his elves. Like his Tolkien's elves and Tolkien's fairies are very different than the ones that, like, it's not Tinkerbell flying around in there. Right. It's like murder and betrayal and all like the 2 point Hans Christian Andersen themes.
Yeah.
So do you like, and I hate to drag us back in this, do you like all the supplemental, like they're making movies out of like his notes and his like Similarian and all that stuff? Like, do you like that stuff, or is it like, okay, you're gone too far, Hollywood?
I think it's gone a little too far. They had I think it was his son or his stepson who rewrote or finished his notes on some of it, and it's just not as good. No shade to the stepson. I don't think anybody would be as good. But yeah, there were some things. Yeah. Anyway, I do like his analysis. I think is awesome. Like Tolkien as a professor, and Tolkien, his first job was working for the Oxford English Dictionary.
I did not know that.
Yeah, if you can open the original Oxford English Dictionary to this day, and I think it's the letter W. A lot of the entries under the letter W are by J.R.R. Tolkien.
Which is genius because you got to pick like a letter with a lot of words. You can like take them all.
Yeah,
I'll take all the Z's.
he knew like. It was at least several, but he basically knew all these Old Norse and Germanic languages, and he just memorized them. And he was the world leading expert on all these words that came up through like these Germanic and Norse languages. Like Elvish, the language he invented, is derived from his knowledge of a lot of those things. So anyway, yes, he can get.
We're learning more stuff than we learned last time. We got.
I mean, he was
We're getting deep on this.
No, he was an actual genius, like with language and words. It's really impressive when you actually listen to him as a thinker.
So speaking of geniuses, we stumped you with the start bench cut.
You did.
I've had time to consider.
I've had time to consider.
And we want to do the right thing by society here.
Yeah, I don't want to get sideways of the compliance department. So I will withhold judgment. One of those is a I mean, again, I'm really impressed you came up with those. Like, I've never heard anyone
This is
mention
making
those
Steve
outside-
look really good.
I feel really good about myself.
outside
right
of
now.
work. And not only that, but like those are obscure. Like one of those is a small Canadian company. Another one, APA. That used to be called Apache Energy, and they changed the name to APA, and that's bigger. And then Kazakhstan, I actually know a bunch of the guys. There's a massive project that Chevron developed in Kazakhstan, which is why that's relevant.
See, I thought Clara.net just sounded too normal. That was the other one I was going to throw in there.
No. Those three, that's like, I'm sorry, man. Those three are like the deep magic. You got to be in it to know those.
The best start bench cut answer of all time is the answer that those are so good that I literally can't answer.
That is so deep that I can't answer without violating federal statute.
I'm precluded from offering an opinion in a recorded and distributable form.
Blake, if it makes you feel better, Steve asked my dad, who also lives in your house, who would you start bench cut? Darren, your brother, my brother, and my daughter, his granddaughter, which is tough. And my dad took it to a place where he's like, well, if there was a fire, I'd have to rescue. And I'm like, wait, now we're in a fire? So, like, he stumped him pretty good, but this is the best answer.
This is
awesome.
That's
awesome.
My work here's done. Okay, you can take over.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. So, all that was a lot of fun.
Okay, thank you for letting me do that, by the way. That was...
Well, no.
You're not going to have any listeners left, but I appreciate it.
I don't know. I think the discussion of Tolkien has raised our listeners here.
Yeah, it has, and actually we'll have some folks who actually really enjoy that. I think Beth Hatch in particular will completely. You'll have.
I would like to get her opinion on. I'm still a little smarting over the Smeagol cut, but
I get it.
we can still be friends.
That's the other thing that makes this the best start bench cut, because like literally we were setting this up and it's like, oh, I'm gonna pick some people that. He has to make Smeagol. Smeagol has to be the starter. And you came in and just didn't miss a beat. Now
That's easy.
That's easy. Smeagol's gone. So that made me very happy. So,
but aside from our not knowing your encyclopedic knowledge of the Lord of the Rings, which I enjoyed, you have other accomplishments that we have to dig into.
Not ones I'm nearly as proud of, but yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
So Steve referenced this, but you are a 3-time Paralympian.
Yes.
So before we get into sort of your origin story there, let's go over the basics. So which Olympics were you in?
Yes. So I was in Rio in 2016, and I rowed in that one. I don't know. At some point in this discussion, I both canoe and row,
Okay.
Which are not, like, in some ways they're very different. In some ways they're not really all that different. It's not different that I'm the only guy in a small boat racing down the river in a straight line. In other ways, one's an endurance sport, one's not. One you're facing forward, the other one you're facing backward. Actually, there's not that many differences. That's pretty much all of them. And so in Rio, I was on the rowing team, and then in Tokyo 2021, as it ended up being, I was on the canoeing team and the rowing team. And then in Paris last summer, I was on the canoeing team.
And you have some hardware.
I do. I medaled. I got a silver in Tokyo and a bronze in Paris. Both of those were in the canoe. Yeah.
You're so like modest. Like we don't know a lot of people who have medals. Which, by the way, I have to give you a little shade. You didn't bring them here to flash them to us. You should have those around your neck at all times.
Yeah. Listen, I didn't, but like it doesn't take much to get me to show them off. It's not. I don't know. I'm coming from work. Yeah.
Hey, hit the dump button. So it doesn't take much. Maybe it just takes 3 recordings of the
Yeah. Oh, we lost it again, Blake. Sorry, I got to come back. But I mean, are you ever tempted to just like roll, like just have them on all the time, like around your? They have a ribbon. You can just wear them.
Oh, I mean, it is. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm very proud of them, and it's kind of funny. And like I'll tell you what though, when I bring them places, as soon as I show people, like I become irrelevant.
They just want to see the medal.
Yeah, they're like, oh no, thank you. This is my that's I just want to hang out with this thing, and you go busy yourself elsewhere. It's actually like it's pretty funny. Which I'm not trying to play coy. I love that. Like genuine. I promise this is not false humility. I didn't really ever expect to have a Paralympic medal. Like when I joined the rowing team, I was like 4th, 5th, 6th in the world, and given where I was ranked, it just like. Something would have to go wrong somewhere else, and something would have to go really right for me to do. It was possible, but like definitely not a favorite at all.
Well, and to put it in context, like first of all, it's amazing if you're 4th, 5th, or 6th in the world.
Well, thank you.
But the way the Olympics works, there's only 3 medals. So
That's it. Like,
I get that.
I mean, I can tell you, I've been third and I've been fourth, and that's a very, very different experience. And I was fourth in Rio, and that was where I expected to finish. I was seeded fourth. I'd been fourth a couple times, but
is this a sport where, in basketball, any team can kind of beat any team? But is this a sport where like you know your times and you're pretty much going to be in that way?
That's
exactly variation.
That's exactly right. Like there's just not. Canoeing is a little bit more because it's shorter. There's a little bit more any given Sunday to it. Rowing's really not that way, especially at that level. Things are very consistent.
So are there some guys who are, it's got to be like a glass surface for them to really do well, and if there's a little bit of wind kicking, it'll throw them off their game. Is there, I long time ago used to run cross country, and there were guys who were mudders, and there were guys who were basically track stars on running on a trail, and you could tell the difference depending on the conditions. Is it like that on the water?
There is some of that. The big one you'll notice is the wind. Like some guys are like, people generally say the bigger guys are better in the headwind. You're throwing more weight at it, so a little more momentum tends to help. I don't actually know how true that is, but you hear people say that. Yeah, there's absolutely condition questions that come into it. At that level, pretty much everybody can row in slop, okay. but you do see it. I mean, it's the margins are obviously not big, so my race was about 10 minutes, and some of those races, mine never really did, but some of those races come down to pieces of a second. Yeah. So in that there are a bunch of, actually Tokyo was sort of notorious for that because it was right off of. You couldn't really see it from the camera, but it was basically like the race course, a seawall with a road on it, and then the Pacific Ocean. And so you would get the wind kicking off the ocean, and right at the last 500 meters of the 2000, there were a few boats at the Olympics that were in medal position and then hit a gust of wind, hit a bad wave, and got either swerved out of the lane, something broke, somebody's oar got hung up, and they left without a medal because of it.
Wow.
So a lot of times you don't see it be a big deal, but boy, when it is, you notice it's a big deal.
Yeah. So I want to dig into all your experiences because that's cool, but I think our listeners would really probably be super interested in your how you got to where you're going because it's also very interesting.
The good old UA origin story.
Yeah. Yep. So you're living in my house.
I was gonna say, I'm living in your house,
and you're on the UA.
Yes.
Crew. Is it a crew team?
Crew team, rowing team. You name it. I think it's probably got a lot of different names. But yeah, I was living in your house. By
the way, it's his house at the time. Like I did not even know about it
yet. Right. We moved there in 2004, 2006, I think. Anyway, freshman, lived there through high school. Senior year of high school, March 2009, getting ready for the crew season to start. Was playing an Optimist basketball game at Hastings Middle School, and then went home that night, Saturday night, and my right leg hurt. Like felt like muscle soreness, like we've all had, like sore calf type thing. All right, whatever, no big deal. Went out, hung out with some friends that night. Like again, really didn't think twice of it. Got up the next morning, I was like, man, this is like a lot worse actually. Like this is like it's going the wrong direction. Still wasn't worried or anything. I didn't have any injuries, quote unquote. Like nothing had happened to it. It was, it was just painful. It got to Sunday night, and I was struggling to walk on it. It's like, okay, this is like, maybe something's really actually wrong. I woke up Monday morning. I thought, okay, if I wake up, if it's this bad or worse in the morning, I'll go to the doctor. Woke up Monday morning, couldn't walk on it. No one's in the house. Crawl down the stairs, grab the phone off the counter, call my mom, like, hey, come take me to the doctor. And it's my right leg's starting to get red and swollen at this point, so it's pretty obvious things or something is wrong. We have no idea what. Go to the pediatrician's office. He looks at me for a minute and a half and sends me to the ER. No kidding. It's just like, yeah, something
you're going.
Yeah, he's like, no, like you just go now.
Did he know what it was, or he just knew it looked bad?
No idea. He just knew it looked bad. And got to ER, and this is I'm gonna have to start giving it to you secondhand because this is where my memory starts fading out. Get to ER, tests, CAT scans, ultrasounds, all this stuff, and again, I have this big red swollen leg, and it's excruciatingly painful. But that's it. Those are the symptoms. And then my last memory for about 6 weeks is the next morning when I remember somebody that moved me to the ICU, and somebody, well, I remember who it was. It was a surgeon, came in and said, hey, like, we don't know what's wrong with your leg. We got to go take you into surgery to figure it out. Like, that's where we're at. They took me into that surgery, and turns out that what I had was called necrotizing fasciitis, the fancy name for it, but it's the flesh-eating disease.
But it didn't look like it just read. It didn't look like there was any like.
Not at that.
You couldn't like see the bone or anything. It wasn't like eating your.
No, not at that point. I mean, it was in the sense of what it was doing, but you wouldn't have seen it from the outside.
That's a better way of answering my stupid
Right?
question.
No. It's a legitimate question. Part of the problem with that disease is how fast it goes. I mean, it can take up They'll say it can take up a centimeter of your tissue an hour.
Oh wow!
And if it gets what it gets a hold of, it will kill. Like there's really no coming back from what the infection's in. They will flood you with antibiotics to stop the process and then debride or take off whatever tissue it's got a hold of. But that's about all you can do. And so they figured out, all right, it's in his leg. That's not good. This is obviously part of the fire drill that happens when you know someone has that is you fly because you have to go as fast as possible. At this point, I was totally unconscious. Other systems are starting to fail. I mean, when your body.
So this escalated quickly. Now it's not just
extremely
your leg.
Right. And I still wasn't getting any better. They took off the dead tissue from my leg, and then they're like, I wasn't awake anymore. And they're like, well, what's wrong? And they took back into the ICU and basically examined me again, and it had gotten in my bloodstream and moved up into my right tricep. Now, fortunately, it wasn't my right tricep muscle; it was my right tricep tissue and skin. And
how do they know that? Because as I asked you before, you don't see
so
it.
So on this one, and it would have happened, and I think it got to that point in my life. And we're sitting here in the podcast room, and you could see the aftermath. What they take off is
okay.
But the way my dad tells it is they I grabbed your wrist and I picked up your arm to see what was behind it because he remembered he had like helped me out of the bed or into a wheelchair at some point. And he'd grabbed me by the arm and I'd winced. I don't remember this, but he said something was wrong there, and he said I was just black from the elbow to the shoulder.
So you could see something on the arm.
At this
too.
point, it was like, oh, that's exactly what that is, and that needs to come off now. And so they take me bang bang, immediately take me back, take off all that tissue, and I think it was during that surgery my heart stopped on the table. So things have cascaded into disaster at this point. Old neighbor Michael Stryker.
Yeah, this is why Blake is kind of a celebrity in our neighborhood, and they always talk about how awesome they are, and then
not for good reasons.
And then they're like, yeah, and the neighbor like saved his life. Basically.
Oh,
I mean that's the story.
That's what happened.
Accurate?
Yeah. So, and he probably wouldn't, he's always bashful about it, but he did. He was just on call that day, vascular surgeon at hospital, and takes me in, and he was not really operating on me per se, but when my heart stopped, he was the vascular surgeon that he was responsible for putting me on heart-lung bypass. And so,
and what does that mean? That means like it's working for you because you're not doing it?
Exactly. Like your heart and your lungs have stopped, so we're gonna do that externally, but they have to attach it to you.
Like this is serious stuff. This isn't just.
This is literally palliative care at this point. This is end of life procedure, and he probably would have been justified in not doing that. It was so far gone that my understanding, doctor that I am not, is that there's a school of thought that that's just putting the patient in that condition, you're putting them through a lot for a little at that point. And I believe every word of this from him. He leaves the OR, sees my parents, walks out, and they're like, Mike, what are you doing here? They hadn't seen him yet. And straight out of surgery, he goes, well, here's what happened, tells him the story. Here's what I did, put him on heart-lung bypass. The machine we have, we can't keep him on for very long, but if we move him to Ohio State, they have a machine he can be on for a much longer period of time. It doesn't look good, and he kind of walks through the prognosis. But he says, I know my older brother, Anderson at the time, was in college in New Jersey. And he said, well, if we move him to Ohio State, we can probably keep him alive long enough for Anderson to get home. And that was about it. And
you're out still.
Oh, I was out. I remember none of this. Full coma at this point. Totally non-responsive. And then And he goes, of course, my parents are just shell shocked at this point. So he goes, hey, great. I already filled out the paperwork. Sign it. Sign it. We're gonna move him.
Yeah.
And so, all right, good looking out, Mike. Appreciate you. But he said, look, I shouldn't say ordinarily. I think it was something akin to often we don't do this kind of thing for a patient in this condition. But I know Blake, and Blake's young, and he's strong, and we're gonna give him a shot, which I appreciate.
Yeah, understatement of the year. Thank you.
There's a common theme in this whole story, which I hope everybody takes out of it, is that they were like, I could tell that exact story of, person A should not have done what person A did, but in doing so kept me alive and gave me a shot. And after about the 8th one of those, it's like, man, I got a lot of thank you cards to write. This is kind of cool. Anyway, so I'll condense a lot of this, or we'll be here all day. Mostly me bragging about like neighbors and friends who were just taking care of me. Then moving to Ohio State, it really was at that point, I didn't have the infection anymore, but heart, lung, kidney, liver failure, like it was just a disaster management basically. And over the course of the next 6 weeks, one of the things that really got me and caused most of the amputations was ischemia, where you lose blood flow to your lower extremities if you're on this bypass machine for a long period of time, which I was. And that's what did it. So over the course of the next 6 weeks, they take you back to surgery and they keep revising what's happened just to kind of fight off any dead tissue. I don't really remember much of this. I mean,
did you wake up at all yet, or you still been out pretty much this whole time?
I've been out the whole time. I have I know from checking the calendar after the fact that it was about 6 weeks where I couldn't tell you anything coherent. And then they've told me, okay, they did bring me back a few times. I say bring me back, wake me up a few times, and then gave me an amnesic painkiller because whatever happened when they woke me up was bad enough. They're like, wipe that.
Yeah.
That's a thing?
That's the thing.
I saw that in RoboCop where they're like,
apparently that's a thing. I don't know.
I remember in RoboCop when you see him kind
of. Oh yeah, they're
alive.
like, nah, scratch that.
Yeah.
Like strike that from the record.
Yeah.
I was told by people in the room there was a few of those, and then I do have like you start you don't come out of these things all at once. You're kind of like in the twilight zone almost literally for a long time, and like nothing makes sense. It's like, okay, well I can't get out of bed, like to the point where I didn't know I'd had amputations happen, but I know I can't get out of bed. And I know it's just a weird dream state is the only way I can describe it to people.
So have you seen Jamie Foxx's new special where he talks about when he
got really sick?
I have not, no.
So he talks about how he was out and what it was like waking up and having them tell him that, dude, you've been out for weeks and you pretty much almost died. Or you did die, and they brought you back. Words really can't do it justice in the sense that it's every bit as disorienting as you might think. Yeah.
And then it's not just that it's not a binary. It's not either or. Like, oh, I'm awake, I'm asleep. It's you get little by little that you kind of get some clarity, and then you start fitting the pieces together. So as I was coming out of this, it was actually a source of relief to get a little more clarity where it's like, all right, I know I'm in a lot of pain and I know things are wrong. I've established that in my own head, but I have no idea why, and I don't know how to do anything about it. And then obviously I spent a little more time coming back, and I remember the last.
What's the first thing you like straight up remember? Like, okay, I'm kind of awake now. I'm back.
Oh, that's a good question. I remember watching the Masters, the golf tournament.
I'm sorry, that's not a good first memory.
Not really.
So boring.
And like by remember, I mean like I remember like I could tell you I knew I was in a hospital room with a TV mounted in the corner and there was golf on.
And it was just that Jim Nance.
That's exactly coming from Amen Corner. Very much that was that's a clear memory I have. And I'm not even sure that was in 6 weeks, but at some point in there I have that memory and it stuck.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, then I kind of got filled in on what happened, and that was a whole nother layer of weird because about the third day, and I'm sure if my parents were here, they'd tell you like we had this conversation, quote unquote, this conversation about what happened 3 or 4 times, if not more. Like they had a Columbus Dispatch, and they showed it to me, and it was like 3 weeks old, and it's my face above the fold on the front page, and it's like your class picture. Here's what's going on with this kid from UA, And I'm like, oh, I'm the last one to know about
It's
this.
like,
This is
how is there an article about me? that I don't even
I was
know
like, this is literally old news at this point, and I'm figuring it out. Like I missed all of March Madness because of this. What's happening?
That's my primary concern.
How'd my bracket do?
I was gonna say,
this
did I win the bracket?
Yeah. And I'm making light of it, but also it is genuinely kind of just this Alice in Wonderland experience.
And just because people might not know your story, what ultimately did they have to do to get you to where you are today?
So they ended up having to amputate my right leg above the knee, and basically remove all the muscle as well. So I have a little bit of femur left on my right side and none at all on my left side. They totally remove your leg and take out the femur and leave just the pelvis, and that's it. It's called a hip disarticulation for everyone that really, really wanted to know. But once, and I don't really remember any of the amputations per se, like before and after. I remember some of the aftermath. Like I had to go back to surgery a few times.
This is all happening before the Masters that you saw. This is like before you woke up, or did this happen afterwards? Like, hey, we got to take you back for one more thing.
Some of it's probably afterwards.
Okay.
Some of it's.
But you're
probably
not back to
afterwards.
like having conversations and being.
No, I wouldn't say that. Like I could say, one problem was it was really hard to get. So I've been intubated so many times, my vocal cords had split, so I couldn't talk.
Oh,
Like, I
that's gotta
literally
be
couldn't.
double frustrating.
Oh yeah. Oh, it was infuriating. And that healed on its own, but it took. I mean, I literally could not make any sound. So there. I mean, there to say nothing. Like I couldn't pick my head up off the pillow either. I mean, this was like if you can. I was an infant, essentially, but one that's like. I mean, I remember waking up and I would count progress week to week by how many ports there were or things going in. I remember the first count was like 25.
Like ports, like where the medicine's going in and stuff's coming out.
Yeah, something is sticking somewhere and doing something to me, and it was well into the 20s. And I remember that. I remember thinking, okay, like, all right, I'm going to surgery tomorrow. Now, then it's going to 18. Then it's going to this. I remember thinking that as a scoreboard for myself.
So how long was it before you were able to leave the hospital?
Maybe from like when you're kind of awake, not like the whole 6 weeks, whatever.
Call it 3 months in total, about 100 days, and about 2 months that I was awake for.
Okay. So did you get to go to graduation?
No.
So yeah, what?
I left the hospital last week of June.
Okay.
Went in middle of March, left the last week of June. And when I left, I mean, I was not really in condition to go anywhere.
But got to go home.
But got to go home.
So you go home, and you're physically different. I don't know if you're able to graduate or did you need to make up classes. You have your high school situation going on, college plans. Like, what's your life like when you get home? It's got to be a lot of weighing on you now, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I probably shouldn't say it like that. I was extremely relieved to be home. The other thing that I feel like is important is just the arc of the recovery mattered. Like when okay, here I am going from I literally cannot speak, can't get up, I can't move, to okay, 2 months later, like, all right, by standards of like an able-bodied person or who I was 3 months ago, I can't do anything. But man, this is a lot better than 2 months ago. Like I can feed myself and I can talk and sweet. And it's just hard to you live through a progress like that, and it's huge, right?
So you're making like not small incremental.
Oh,
you're making leaps and bounds, gains,
leaps
in
and
your
bounds,
recovery.
like week to week at that point, which is it makes it a lot easier. Isn't quite the right word, but it lets you set much smaller. It's cliche, like, hey, just worry about tomorrow and don't get too far ahead of yourself. That made that easier because I remember like, oh yeah, like 2 weeks ago I couldn't do X, Y, Z, and now I can.
I do want to get back to one thing real quick. Was Kip Greenhill your principal?
Yes, he was.
Did he make you finish up your classes? I mean, he's
He's a stickler.
He's a stickler. I do know Kip Greenhill was a great friend and supporter to me. So this is not.
We're joking around about it.
Yeah, we are. I went to dinner with Kip last Wednesday.
Oh, beautiful.
We love Kip.
I was going to say,
we love Kip, and so this is a chance for you to go at Kip. I mean, he was your high school principal, and it's a chance.
I
You've
have
always wanted the ability to go at him.
I have no desire to go at Kip at all. However,
yes, give us.
However, Miss Scott and Miss Haddad, who I'm sure they would be both embarrassed if I named their names. So I got to the end of the year and they said English. I needed, and I had good grades. I mean, maybe not good by UA standards, but good enough.
Yeah.
And you had to have, I think it was English and government were the two that you had to finish. And like yes, I've had it relayed to me, and I can't confirm this, but that they like almost came to blows with people where it's like he's gonna finish. Like Blake does not need to come back and do any of this. Like this is how this is gonna go. They both came in. They both came to the hospital and like.
So you were able to graduate without having to do like the Billy Madison going back.
Oh no! I'm sure she'd be embarrassed to admit they came to the hospital and said, "Well, we'll orally administer the final exams." Like,
okay, while you're that.
Well, you can't speak.
Sure. Yeah, right. And it was late in the year, but they're like, "Yeah, no, we'll take care of it," and they did. They showed up and we chatted. And so there was anyway.
So that's something off your plate. You do not have to worry about making up the.
When I mentioned that, like someone showed up at the right time and like took care of me, there you go.
That's what you got.
That's what happened. And look, I gotten into Ohio State, applied. Like I didn't really plan on going to Ohio State, I guess, but I didn't really have a plan. I look at like the kids these days are so much better prepared. Like they think these things through. I really didn't, honestly. But it worked out great. I mean, I was in. I kind of knew. I almost kind of knew immediately. Like, all right, well. Just go to OSU. Like I know it checked.
You knew some folks over at the Med Center at this point.
I knew a couple.
Were you able to start on schedule?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was. So it helped a lot. One thing, it helped a lot that we were still on quarters because we didn't start really almost at the end of September. I probably wouldn't. If I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't start on schedule just because I was so beaten up. But like 6 months after getting sick, it's like, oh, I feel this is great. Like recently, but it took me 2 years before I felt sort of normal, and I just didn't appreciate how out of whack I really was. But it was nice because then you have something to work for. Something to work for. You're making progress. You're starting on all those things. So all those sort of like day-to-day things were actually really good. But I was still on like handfuls of painkiller, and you're sleeping 12 or 13 hours a night, which is great. It's what I needed, but makes school tough.
Yeah. So your body's physically different now.
Oh,
You've been kind of inactive for a while because you were literally intubated and in a coma. How do you go? And I'm amazed you even started school on time. How do you go from that to, hey, maybe I'm going to get back in the boat? And I think you described last time it's not the same as when you were in it before. Talk about that, because I would just be like, I think I'm done. I'll play video games all the time.
Yeah. Well, so I didn't get back in a boat for almost 4 years exactly. Didn't really want to. And it was very much like, this is going to be and when we say different, I mean, people who've been around rowing will know just how different. But, you go from 8 guys in a boat all at once. And, like, rowing's mostly a leg-driven sport. The seat rolls in the boat, and that's what does it. And I knew para-rowing was out there, but I didn't really care.
You knew before this ever happened, or you kind of heard about it after
I knew, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I just assumed it did, which is great. Like, I wouldn't have had anything negative to say. I would have just said, like, hey, I don't think that's for me. I know how different it's going to be. I know, and it's still hard. I mean, that's the other thing is like, it's not like, I mean, I know people that row as a hobby, but I don't recommend it. I honestly, like, it's just one of those activities that, like, you either do it hard and do it. It's no fun to do it poorly, basically, is what I would say. I know I've heard a lot of people talk about golf the same way. They get to a point in life, get to wherever, like, listen, if I can't hit it in the fairway, I don't want to play. And I agree with that as a guy that used to play golf and doesn't anymore. It feels like that, where you're like, doing this thing badly is not worth doing. That was sort of where I was at. And then went through college, got a lot better, felt better. I'm thinking about a career, decided, hey, I'll go to law school. It's great. I was going to Ohio State. Cool. Went to graduate, and then thought, it was like, okay, I'm becoming an adult, and I've recovered. I'm to your point, my body's really different, and I've kind of figured out how to deal with that. So, okay, cool. I know what the deal is now. I know what my adulthood's going to look like, but I need a workout routine. I've just kind of like been kind of a bum for the last 4 years. And in the beginning there, I don't know that I definitely couldn't have handled a bigger physical workload, so that was different. But if for almost any disability, really, especially a lower body disability, the rowing machine's an awesome way to work out. I mean, it's an awesome way for anybody to work out, but you can modify it really easily. You just put a different seat on it. You bolt it to the rail instead of the seat that rolls on it, like we've seen in the gym. Good to go. Strap yourself in and start spinning the wheel. And I did that. Hated it to begin with.
Well, you're doing this for exercise at this point. You're not like, I'm going to go to the Olympics.
No. I had no plans to even tell anybody. I'll tell you this, in the background of all this is I don't say this proudly, but I had no desire to do it for the pat on the head. Like this was not to. I'm not going to do this to make anybody else feel good.
Yeah.
And again, I don't say that proudly, but that was very much where my head was at. Like, all right, great, you get to feel like it all worked out for Blake, and then I'm the one that has to sit on the machine and spin the wheel. Like, no dice.
Although I do like the idea of other people doing the work and me feeling better.
Let's
not dismiss that out of hand.
Listen, if you can get it going for one of those is great.
If Steve would exercise for me and I could just feel better about it, I would be all in.
Yeah, for sure, right? And then, but anyway, I acknowledge it was sort of like, hey, I need to take some responsibility. And I like exercise. I like feeling healthy. I like lifting, all that good stuff. So that was a source of enjoyment. And finally got over the muscle memory of basically what you're breaking down. And then one of the cool things about rowing as a sport, able-bodied or para, doesn't make a difference, is the national team will publish standards on the rowing machine, just the time the computer spits out of, hey, if you're this faster, you can try out. If you're this faster, you might be able to make a team.
So is the rowing machine kind of analogous enough to being in the boat that they can say, hey, if you're good here, you're probably going to be good here?
Yes, I would tell.
I can shoot baskets in the gym, and if I make 10 free throws in a row, I'm not going to do that in a college game.
Yeah, no, right. I take your point. The analogy at that level, the analogy works because they would tell you that if you're capable of getting on a machine and pulling anywhere near those times, physically, we're going to teach you how to row. Like, we can do that. Like, it's not like I can't take you out and put you in a boat day one and have you move the boat. That's not going to happen.
You've got what it takes.
That's it. Like, we know the raw materials there. It's just a question of teaching and repetition. Exact same for para. If you can move the boat, then you can. It's sort of like the saving grace of people who are bad on the rowing machine or slow. Well, they'll say ergs don't float. The ergometer is the technical name for the rowing machine, so we call them ergs. But say, oh, well, they don't float. Which is like, it's at the high school level, maybe that's true.
Yeah.
Where like you can actually win races just by rowing better. But even and I didn't row in college, but even at the college level, you can see it. It's kind of like, well, they kind of do though. And when everyone can figure out how to put the blade in the water, like that's not the thing that's going to separate you.
There's no magical technique.
It's not blade technique. It's lung capacity and strength.
No, exactly. And people will argue about that, but I come down staunchly on the side of like, just I'll bet on who can move the most oxygen. Like that's
is also probably related to what we talked about earlier, where you can look at those times and see this person is probably going to win because they got the best times. It's just
exactly all that correlation is pretty tight.
So you see your scores are doing better than you expected, I guess, like with these published lists. I mean,
yeah, probably better than I expected.
I mean, you were just like a guy did it in high school, and now you're looking at like nationwide teams, right? That's
yeah.
Did that blow your mind? That seems crazy to me. They're like, hey, I'm number 4 in the world or whatever.
Yes and no. I mean, like I was pretty good. I mean, I hate to say that, but like I was good. Like I left UA with a school record. Like, I knew I could spin the wheel.
Is it still there? Did someone break it?
No, somebody broke it.
Oh, come on, man.
I think only one or two guys have broke. I mean, it as far as these things go, it was not a terribly impressive record. And that's not false humility. It just wasn't.
Yeah.
But I always felt like I was kind of a young, like late grower, which is, everybody says that, but I happen to be the guy I was true for. No. But no, I got recruited by D1 schools and like top 5 programs. Like there was, they all thought I could hang in there.
Okay, so you were legit.
Yeah, I mean, there were. I met coaches on the national team that were coaching other boats that recruited me while I was in high school.
So this is not like a mind-blowing possibility when you're noticing that your scores are good. Like this is something that you could have maybe seen yourself doing.
No, to give them credit, this was not me speaking, and they're being a little bit of cheerleaders when they did this. But my coach, Pat Kington, another UA Golden Bear, who was he was a coach at UA when I was there, and he's still my coach today. There was an Olympian that he was friends with from Beijing, or actually from Athens, who had a gold medal, who came and visited while I was in the hospital. I can't remember this, but he came and visited. And they would both tell you they were sat there with no one else there having the conversation, like, okay, like what Blake pull in high school and this, that, and it was like, oh, can you be like, oh yeah, he'll like, if he wants to, he'll make the team with
those times.
That engine, yeah. Like that he can just do it if he wants. And again, I feel bad saying that out loud. It sounds very dismissive of competition, but there were a lot of people that were in that camp.
So having been at 3 Paralympic games and gotten to watch other Paralympic sports and competitions, is there anything that you're like, oh man, if I had only seen that, I totally would have done that instead?
Like another sport or something?
Yeah, another sport.
Oh man, that's a great question.
I mean, you could say curling because that's what I want to do. But.
So that's a great answer, actually. Curling would be cool. I know some people on the curling team. The one sled hockey's awesome.
Okay.
Could you do it?
I could.
Have you done it?
No. Because you're basically getting in a car wreck every game.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen, you're on a sled with 2 skate blades basically right underneath you you're sitting on, and then if you have a leg out in front, which they actually recruit amputees because you turn a lot faster.
Okay.
So you're very quick on the ice. But you instead of playing with a regulation stick, you play with 2 sticks, one in each hand. They're only about 2 feet long, but they have crampons on the end of the stick. So you dig those into the ice, and you're sort of, it looks like cross country skiing almost, but you are flying.
I would think as a rower, if anyone from the sled hockey team's listening to this and they hear that you have a slight interest, they're going to be like,
oh, why? One of my best friends on the canoeing team, we recruited him. I didn't, but he got recruited for canoeing because he has 2 gold medals, or maybe 3 at this point, gold medals in sled hockey.
Okay.
Yes, to your point, the crossover's tight.
Yeah.
The other one I'd like to do is biathlon, skiing and the shooting. That just looks fun.
So this is possibly a dumb question. I think I asked it last time though, so I get a pass. With the Paralympics, you're getting in there. Are there rules on what you have to have or what you can do? Because it seems like, someone with visual issues might have a better chance than someone. Are there rules for different events? How does that work?
It's a great question. I wish more people would ask this question actually, because it helps make sense of what's going on. So the short answer is yes. There are lots of rules. Some sports have more than others. Some sports have some sports are very clean that there's just categories. Like canoeing and rowing are that way, where they literally will group you by your disability, and they will define your disability really tightly. So you have to go actually get a medical exam in front of, they call it classification is the technical word. And literally it's
Can you give me like examples of what the canoeing classifications are?
Definitely. So like they call it, for canoeing, they'll call it like VL1, VL2, and VL3, which I know is not helpful.
All right, I know.
Yeah. Oh, why didn't you just say so? Yeah. But it stands for, my canoe is technically called a va'a, which is the Polynesian word for outrigger canoe, which is where it comes from. So it's just canoe 1, canoe 2, canoe 3. But each of those has disability ranges within it. So for me, it's obviously lower body disability. Canoeing, it's all lower body disabilities. Right. You're not going to see, let's say, like a unilateral amputee, upper extremity amputee in the canoe, because the limit of the sport is you do have to have both arms.
Okay.
So within every sport, there are limitations like that, where there are, maybe not every sport, but most sports are just going to be like, okay, you can't, unless you have a certain array of a disability, you can't play. For example, I'm actually too able-bodied to play wheelchair rugby.
Okay.
Yeah, even as a double amputee, full-time wheelchair user, doesn't matter. You have to be in a wheelchair and have an upper extremity disability as well, because if you don't, you can like kill each other.
Yeah, you can get going too.
That's it. It's like 2 steel chairs from the opposite ends of a basketball court. You can it's bad. So you're not allowed to do that. And like wheelchair rugby is a good example because it's probably one people have seen. But there's actually a point system in wheelchair rugby where they'll test everybody, and by test they literally bring you in for like an hour-long exam, and they have a doctor and a referee sitting there on the table in the doctor's office, like, okay, do this, do that, like poking and prodding, being like trying to figure out what you can do. Then in that sport, they'll assign you a point value, and then when you come to the game, they say, okay, each team is only allowed so many points on the floor at any one time.
Oh, okay.
All right, so you see where the not gamesmanship, but like the strategy comes in of like, hey, you might be I'm going to make the numbers up, but you might be a 1 with a really high disability level, but because you free up points for the higher one, you could be incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
And there are a number of team sports are like that. There's also I'll tell you what, a really fun sport to watch is goal ball, which is visually impaired. It looks like you basically play on a volleyball court, and you think like two small soccer goals at the end of the court, and everybody is either fully visually impaired or you wear a blindfold. And the name of the game is throw the ball by the other team, but the ball has bells in it.
Okay.
So you can hear where it's coming from, but that's it.
Wow.
Throw it by the other guys and don't let it get by you.
How do you know where the goal is? Is there sound?
You know
there?
it's behind you. You can start. You'll line up. You can either have a coach or you can feel your way into the court to know. Okay, I'm approximately where I need to be.
Okay.
But it's just incredible to watch teams of blind athletes maneuver. It's kind of wild. And then you'll be there and you're sitting in the stadium and it is they enforce the silence strictly, as you can imagine.
Yeah, that's what they need.
That's what it has to be. You literally can't play without it. So they're like pin drop. You can hear the ball bounce. You can hear it spin. You can imagine okay, put some spin on it, move it around. Anyway, I could go into it. It's awesome.
I think they should have special forces do this as training. It sounds like just
it's a great some of these things. Oh, there it is. Some of these sports you can do them as yeah, there's always a way to engineer it so an able-bodied person, you can put them in the sport and limit, kind of make that happen. It's a lot of fun. Sitting volleyball is another one that anyone can play that.
Right.
You do have to have a disability to qualify at the Paralympic level, but anyone
play
can
just
play.
in a game its own one.
Yeah.
So basically, every sport has a system or rule. So I can't say my finger was amputated, I'm going to go do this sport and just crush everybody who doesn't have an arm or something. It's got to be fair.
My answer is yes, but
that was a horrible example. But
that's okay. Wait, oh man, wait for it. So as you can imagine, imagine all of the doping scandals you've heard about.
Yeah.
I won't say to a greater magnitude, but a higher magnitude in classification.
Really?
Oh yeah, the stuff. So one thing that is really interesting to me is and I don't mean to sound like oh woe is us Team USA Paralympians, but the Paralympics is just a much bigger deal in other countries. Part of that is because I think two of the reasons for that is, one, the U.S. Olympic team is so good, and I watch every night for 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
You're gonna see someone win a gold medal, right? And then football starts.
Yeah.
I was sitting in Paris between my races watching Ohio State play. Our market is dominated by that. So by the time the Paralympics roll around, the U.S., we've gone back to school, we've started football. There's not a good fit necessarily. Yeah. And I won't say everyone's kind of Olympic sported out, but you've kind of scratched that itch, right? Other countries, obviously, it's not like that. You might not even be on the medal table. There's also sort of this inherent underdog attitude that people competing with the U.S. do have. Mm-hmm. And so the Paralympics is their time to win medals and be the best in the world at something. And not that, again, I don't mean to wrongly prop up the United States or put anybody else down, but that is the nature of it.
Well, the United States pours the most money, and maybe China does now, but into the Olympics, that it's hard to compete with just the resources they're throwing into it.
Well, so
at least the main Olympics.
I would say yes, no, and kind of, because first of all, I'd say define resources. Because, for example, we have an NCAA program that, but there are guys that are going to make that swim team that didn't have full rides. Rowing, most of the women will have had full rides to college, but no one, you're not getting paid to row. You're not going to.
Gotcha. I was talking more of the high tech equipment they wear.
Oh, now some sports, I have friends on the shooting team that are sponsored by Remington. Okay, that's a little different. But okay, the British team, the British team's lottery funded. They just took a cut of the British lottery goes towards Team GB, and it shows. They deck it out. You could show up at these, especially at the Paralympics. It's night and day, the resources. And I'm not complaining. I feel very well supported. But it's not the same. And now, there are other ways in which, again, with the college system we have that doesn't necessarily exist somewhere else. I don't know I'm sure you've seen the stats where it's how many Olympians did Stanford have if you include all of the sports in all of the countries? Right. It's they would have been third on the medal table or something ridiculous. So there are other ways you can get support like that. But there are some countries, like China, same story. Russia was notorious for that until they got booted. Here's a story, and since they got booted, I feel vindicated. But My first race, 2014, make the team for the first time, go get classified, great. Being an amputee, these things are pretty straightforward. It's like, oh yeah, you weren't kidding.
Can't fake that.
Nope.
Yeah.
It's like, yep, you said what you were right. Like, go ahead.
Yeah, unless David Copperfield's around.
I was gonna say, like, all right, son, go. Yeah, appreciate you telling the truth. Get out there.
Yeah.
There was in the counterpart event, the female single. I was in the men's single, in the women's single, in the same Paralympic class. The Russian entry got, I don't know how they found out, but they'd found out that she was taking an epidural before her examinations so that she could essentially throw the test and pass.
She couldn't move her leg or something?
Yeah. She's taking a spinal epidural so that.
So she was claiming to be not a amputee, but a.
Yes, she was paraplegic or
yeah.
claiming sufficient lower body and the nuance matters here, but it was literally like, okay, well, I need to fail the nerve tests and the responsiveness tests that like.
That's genius and horrible at the same time.
Yes.
It reminds me of like Mr. Deeds when he stabbed the guy's
exactly
butt.
what it's like.
Just to see if it was real.
And I know part of the reason
is that your second Adam Sandler movie reference today?
It is, yes.
Part of the reason I know this, kudos on the Adam Sandler reference, big support that, is because I saw her walking through the hotel days later.
So she didn't even like sell it the whole time.
No, they booted her. And it was like, she got DQ'd. I mean, it didn't even get DQ'd. She didn't get admitted. And then it was like days later. I was like,
I mean, you got to commit to the ruse.
You got to commit to the bit, man.
Yeah, you can't just be like, all right, I'll walk now. It's cool.
Like, what's the deal? Now, the United States I won't say notorious. Like, we just don't. I won't say we don't. You should never say we don't do that because I'm sure someone somewhere can throw something. My events are relatively straightforward. Actually, rowing wasn't straightforward at all, but that's a different story. Partially because, and I hate to say, like, I could take any of you and I could teach you. Okay, here's the test they're going to run. Here's how to fail it.
Yeah,
it's not that hard. It really isn't. So if you want to commit to it and you want to, I've had multiple, and I won't call out the countries because some of these guys are still competing and I don't want to. But I'm also kind of a coward, I guess. But I've had guys that I raced against send me video on Facebook of whoever their countryman was that beat them the following year to get the spot of that person up walking around playing tennis, walking through a train station.
Defeats the whole kind of purpose, right?
Yeah, it's just like, hey.
So you don't have to be an amputee to do this. You could just be a okay.
No, there's a whole spectrum of disability you can have depending on the event, but here's what you can have. I had one guy send me video. They were at a training center in their country, and he says, like, hey, we competed against each other last year. We were a couple seconds apart. I'm not going to make the Rio Paralympics because of this. And he includes the video clips, and it's like they're at the training center, and usually it's almost no one ever lies completely. There's some deficit somehow.
Yeah.
But it's exaggerated. It's played up. Whatever the case may be, and you can see it. And then you watch. You're like, oh yeah, okay, that's what that is. So I knew. I mean, talked about like some of these events where you know where you're going to finish.
Do you have a nemesis, by the way?
Not really.
Like the guy from Buenos Aires gets me every time.
Right. No, like the Brazilians beat me in canoe, and I respect both of them. So like that's like they're too likable to be like a nemesis, but they do beat me a lot.
If it's the Brazilians, you're going out after and having a good time. With
the
Brazilians.
Yeah, they're notorious. I mean, they're great.
It's I won't pick on a country that is boring afterwards.
No,
like,
we won't. But
it's not like, I don't know, that I can say this because my heritage is German. Germans, there's either the happy Germans or there's the grumpy Germans, and
yes,
yeah. But the Brazilians,
we're just trying to start an international incident here. We're going to keep asking questions.
One of these days, I hope I have one before I retire. That's like, and if not, I'm just going to cause one because some of the stuff, like there were races that I've been in where I knew, like, who I knew who I was racing could walk. And in rowing, I mean, again, back to leg-driven sport, it doesn't matter if the seat's bolted down. You can use your back and you can push off the footboard. I knew I was going to get beat.
Is this really why you didn't want to talk about the Kazakhstan electric?
Yeah, they were.
No, as a matter of fact,
Kazakhstan got it.
It wasn't. But yeah, I got to be careful here. Now I'm gonna get in trouble with a different legal body depending on how I complain.
We'll drop it there. I'm saying I'm smelling something here.
There was
a desire to avoid talking about Kazakhstan before. We had ground rules. I wasn't supposed to bring it back up. I brought it back up. I'm
Steve,
sorry.
I kind of hard driving.
Hey, listen. Suffice it to say, it is something that we should talk about. Well, okay, here's one thing: is that the Paralympics have come a long way, even since I've gotten involved. And again, we can go back to 2000. And this is an important conversation, I think, because back in 2009, when I get sick, the Beijing Paralympics were a big deal. I know a lot of people that were there. It was a huge event, second largest sporting event in the world, they'll say, and that's true. You really didn't hear anything about it in the United. It just wasn't much of a cultural.
They don't air any of it. They kind of tell you it's coming on next, but you feel it's because of the venues are built.
Exactly. I mean, there was no. You certainly wouldn't say there was emphasis or coverage, right? And I think some of that contributes. Like, okay, again, I don't really. And I say this cynically. Apologies to other Paralympians so I don't want to compete in the Good for You games. Like, I got markets open tomorrow. Like, I got other stuff to do. I don't need, I can compete in other ways.
I gotta buy some bonds from some power company.
There it is. Like, we can, I can compete at a high level in other ways, and not to mention, do I really, I spent most of my 20s on a rowing machine, which I don't regret for a second, but I did. And I'm not going to do that for something I don't really believe in achieving it. Anyway, once I got fast enough on the rowing machine that the U.S. team was like, hey, you can try out and make the team.
Do you send your score somewhere, by the way, or how do they even know?
You do. You kind of email. They're kind of they solicit scores, and then I entered an indoor race where they just linked the rowing machines together, and it was the Indoor World Championships, actually. I knew my numbers were competitive, so I entered. It was in Boston.
Steve, you and I need to enter that, man. We would dominate. Dominate last and second to last place.
Yeah, exactly.
So I entered that and I won. And then the team was like, okay, you got to try out. We think you can make Team USA. And if it hadn't been for that, I would have never gotten back in a boat. Just wouldn't have gotten over myself. Wouldn't have thought it was worth it. Yeah. All that. I don't say any of that proudly. I ended up 4th in Rio. If I'd gotten over a little sooner, might not have been 4th. But there it goes. But until I saw the Paralympics from the inside, I had a total misconception. Just how brutal it is. The competition, the selection procedures. It is. I mean, it's different in a lot of important ways than the Olympics, and even that nuance is kind of interesting. But still, I was like, oh, okay. Like, I feel good about competing here. This is kind of cool. Like, we're really going at it. I'd give you all that background to say that you can kind of sense over the generations. Barcelona in '92, I think, was the first Paralympics that was like a full-on Paralympics. And people would, not just me, but people would tell you that at first there was much more emphasis on participation. Like, hey, how do we get somebody from every country to go to the event and fill it out and great. There were some astonishing performances, but you'd see some of the gaps are pretty wide. And it was more just like, hey, can we get people involved? Totally understand that. Over the years, that's really shifted to being, instead of participation-oriented, it's competition-oriented. And it's essentially taken over. Now it's incredibly hard to qualify. It's people are, climbing over each other to get a spot, find a sport they can be in, all of that. It's become a true international thing. I've been in 3. I can tell you the differences between 2016 and 2024. I wouldn't say night and day at all. They're very different in the United States, but different, to say the least.
I can tell you, and I don't know if it's because I bought your house and my wife follows you like she's like your biggest fan.
Which I appreciate.
But I felt like the Paralympics have become more of a thing from a fan perspective. They're showing some of it on TV. They're talking about it more. And again, I don't know how much of that is, hey, I know someone there, but I think it does feel like it's more now. And I think you're sensing that from your side of things too.
Oh, 100%. I mean, this is obviously anecdotal, but when I started, I would get Special Olympian the most. I'd get Olympian the second most. And then occasionally somebody would label me a Paralympian. That's totally reversed, basically. Now it's like, oh, you're Paralympic. Like, it's just that. It's even you see somebody on a plane and you've got your, you're flying to a race, you get your team stuff. Oh, you're in the Paralympics? Like, it's different. It's very different in that regard, which is cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. But yes, I don't want to say come a long way, because again, if you weren't sitting in the United States necessarily,
they're ahead of us.
They're way ahead. So here's my folksy example of this. In Rio, I got back from Rio, and
I forget, Rio's the first one.
Rio was the first one, but 2016. I mean, it's not
a million years.
It's 10 years ago or whatever. Not quite. And I had somebody come up to me in church, a friend of mine, and say, hey, like, it was great. My wife and I got to watch your race. And I knew it wasn't on TV. And they'd actually restrict, you couldn't even you couldn't live stream it, any of that. So I know no one in the States saw it. And I was like, I'm kind of like, well, I didn't say anything.
Do I call him out on this?
Yeah, it's like, no, of course I'm not
You
going to
did
do
not
that. Like,
watch
no,
me.
of course. Like, I'm not going to be rude, but like, it's like, no, you're just trying to be nice. Oh, hey, thanks, appreciate it. And you could tell he kind of hesitated. He goes, no, really. Like, my wife and I were on vacation in England, and we were in London, and your race was on. Now, the British guy in my event got third, and rowing in England's huge, so that was part of it. But he's like, no, you were on Channel 4, like on like the evening sports broadcast. Like, I got to watch you. It's like, oh, that like. You were the only person I know that got to see this. Like, that's pretty cool. But it was more, anyway, that just different. And we're a little behind the curve on that. So anyway, seeing that whole process change has been kind of wild. But yeah, even from the inside, my perception of it was I just didn't understand it from the inside, which again, I'm really glad I got over. Best decision I ever made. Get over myself and get back to it.
Was Rio like cool? Because that was the one where like they weren't done and they were afraid of Zika virus and like I don't know. Was there sewage in the water or something?
Oh yeah,
there's always sewage in the water.
Oh yeah, we have a room key that's still in that lake. We dropped it in a foot of water. Coach and I weren't going for it. Rio was an absolute riot. I mean, you couldn't have built a better lake. We were right under the lake we rode on. I mean, you had to crane your neck to look up at the Christ the Redeemer. I mean, and we were between Christ the Redeemer and Copacabana Beach. I mean, it was unbelievable.
And you didn't have expectations of winning.
No,
I knew your score going in, kind of, right?
I thought I had an outside chance at third. Which I did. I did have an outside chance at third. Yeah. I didn't get there. I got fourth.
But it wasn't like a disappointment because fourth is like, oh man, I was so close.
But I'll tell you what, it was actually a triumphant fourth, and this dovetails with the earlier conversation, because and they don't do it as much anymore. But even in Rio, the Chinese team, and especially in rowing, but they do it in other sports too, would disappear for 3 calendar years, right? And then they'd show up at the qualify, show up at the Paralympics and dominate.
Yeah,
like top of the medal table.
They're not doing other competitions and things, so you don't know what they're doing.
Oddly enough, the only ones. Strange. But you could like set your watch by like, no, they're going to show up, they're going to qualify, and you better believe there's somebody's going to be in medal contention. Part of that is they have such a top-down sports system that they will find the quote-unquote right disability for every sport, and they'll put them in that event, and that's just what you're going to do. Yeah. Now, it also takes you out of the drug testing pool for 3 years if you do it right. Okay, whether they are or aren't, those are the facts.
Yeah.
So anyway, we knew this was coming, and I was in good enough qualifying position the year before. We thought I could get in. We weren't really worried about me getting to the games. You had to be top 7 in the world, and I had been 4th the year before, so it's kind of like, okay, I ended up 5th. Hey, great, I'm in.
Only 7 make it?
Yep, on time. There are a few spots behind you that they meet out basically on like they want so many continents involved, and they want so many. There's some other rules, but in the United States, never ever qualifies for those. So you got to get in on other rules. But so you got to finish top 7 at the World Championships the year before you're out. So anyway, it came down to me in China for 4th and 5th, and it was just as tight as could be, and I got him at the line. So that was like we all kind of knew like, all right, maybe I'm not going to medal, but I
moral victory.
That's right.
That was the moral.
I got to hang on for this one. So that felt good.
So this has been great. I think we're in the interest of time. I'm going to take us to our final 2 questions that we ask every guest, unless you have a burning question.
I just have one quick burning question.
Lay it on me.
You won because this is what we.
I'm sorry about the carpet in the basement.
This is where the actually.
But here's the question: you were a teenager in the house. Is there anything that's hidden that he should look for before his daughter gets to be a teenager?
No, I promise it's fine.
If not, he can blame his dad. You went to 3 Olympics. You won medals at 2 of them. Can you just rank either the venues, your experience of all 3? And this is where the international incident's coming. But I'm just curious because I went to Paris Olympics as a spectator this year, so I have a a little bit of it. And I love the Olympics.
We knew it was a spectator. You didn't.
I was
need to
there
make that clarification. There was no need for that.
Look at these physique.
No. So Rio, probably the most naturally beautiful city I've ever seen or expect to see. It was just incredible. Not safe, and was not like I did get sick. I think I got bad ice cubes, so that kind of detracted. But other than that, like amazing to see it. I'm sorry, I should have given this in order. Number one would probably be Paris. The venue was awesome. The people were great. I could go on and on. It was awesome.
Paris was cool.
Paris was cool, top to bottom. We also benefited. The canoeing course was about an hour away from the city, and so the people that were volunteering and running the canoeing course were like the local neighborhood, and basically they got the best of both worlds, where they could like volunteer and be part of the event, but they didn't have the traffic and everybody like interrupting their daily lives. So they were just as cheerful as could be, like just like rooting for you no matter what. My buddies instigated a Team USA chant at the start line of my finals, and they were like 3 out of 10,000 spectators. There were like 6 Americans, and there was no Frenchmen in my event. So they like the French just like took up the banner, and I was grateful for that. Awesome experience. Tokyo was third, but only because like we were locked in the village.
It was COVID, right?
It was COVID. So, I mean, and I'm like, no kidding. We landed in the airport. You take your COVID test at the airport. If you fail, you're going to like, they will turn you around and you're on the next plane out. If you don't, you go to the village. You're barbed wired into the village, monitored. I mean, it was just very, very tight security. So I say sadly, like, you know, the most of Tokyo I got to see was we got to take a bus to the opening ceremonies and back. That's how I got to see Tokyo. But that was about it. That probably would have been number one for me in like every category, because it was genuinely like the facilities were unbelievable, the people were great, like just you could just tell it was awesome, but none of it came to fruition.
And then one last question. Sorry, Steve, are you gonna do LA?
Knock on wood. Yes.
Try?
I'm gonna try. Eventually someone's gonna do to me what I did to the last guy, and I'm getting to that age where that tends to happen. So
tell us who it is. Steve and I will like distract him with we'll give him
was
Laffy
gonna say.
Taffies to slow him down.
That's right. Well,
Hey man, you want some candy?
yeah, we'll be there. We're like, hey,
All right, now you can ask your real questions.
we'll pull Salt Lake City pizza delivery.
Yeah.
that's a deep basketball reference that if you don't get, you don't get. So we finish with 2 questions for all of our guests. What do you love about UA, and what would you change?
Man, those are great questions. I'll start with what I would change. And I know it's technically a Columbus thing. I would have a boatyard or boathouse. Protect the boats in the winter, that kind of a thing. It would also just look better than a chain linked-in fence, you know.
Makes the rowing team look tougher though if you got chain link.
Well,
out
it
there.
does.
Yeah,
it does. I suppose. Yeah, but yeah. So
that's the excuse anyway.
yeah. That's the rationale, right?
I like how you're trying to talk him out of his one thing.
Yeah,
He
that's
changed,
right.
like, I don't know, it's cool.
Yeah, you got to
man.
look at the
It's cool.
positive.
No,
Yeah.
no. I know that's Columbus Parks and Rec. It's not your jurisdiction, you know. It's no.
But I hear you. It would look better.
It'd be kind of nice. You could do some cool things.
Yeah.
I would change that, and then it's probably cliche. I would just say like the closeness of the friends, you know, and relationships I got to. I mean, okay, like, yeah, my next door neighbor took care of me, you know. I mean, and I could tell that doesn't have to be my next door. I mean, if I had, I'll bet. I mean, no exaggeration, I'll bet there were 15 or 20 people that I knew either personally or 1 degree of separation at OSU Hospital that, or even OSU, you know, OSU for school, that it made it, I mean, a lot of, like, you know, you show up to class like, oh, Blake, I know your story. I know everything you've gone through recently. Like, how can I make it easier for you? That happened over and over again. And it was just great. I mean, it really did help me kind of get through all the way through law school, really. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. All right. Well, listen, thank you for coming in, not once, but twice.
Thank you for having me back.
Third time you got to bring the medals.
There it is.
Yeah, like, delete. Just kidding.
And, thanks for continuing to be part of the community. Thanks for asking our dumb questions. I'm sorry I almost had you lose your license.
Nah.
And I'm sorry I tried to start an international incident with your ranking of cities. So.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, my boss lives in UA. Hope I can't, you know.
Yeah, you got
can't have it get back to him.
Yeah. No, we got you. We'll get you covered. So, and thanks for doing what you do and being out there and representing and being an inspiration for a lot of folks.
Hey, pleasure's all mine. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, man.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You guys ready?
As ready as we'll ever be.
All right. You know how this goes, right? All right.
Yeah, Yeah, we can edit this until she breaks the computer.